things always look different in the store than
All right, thank you everyone for coming. I would like to introduce to you Joe Fahey. He's the guy that gets to do the traveling when we're not able to, and so then we can listen to him and all his stories and feel like maybe we vicariously were at those places. Just a couple heads up, he has a website I would highly recommend looking at because there's lots of other programs happening in other area libraries and senior centers. He has a Spotify podcast out about his travels, and there's a little rumor that maybe there's a book that's coming out, and so we're hoping to maybe get him back here as an
Don't
author
tell them,
visit.
they may buy it.
That's kind of the hope, Joe.
Oh, okay.
So please welcome Joe Fahey.
Wow, next time I have to introduce myself, and so I have to become my own best friend and be my own PR person. So thank you very much. And I don't have to self-promote the book or podcast. So anyway, and by the way, the podcast is only 15 minutes each. So for those of you who, okay, I was seeing a lot of nods here. So if you go to my website, can I tell you this is my website? Anyway, so if you go to my website, on the page for the podcast, I basically say, it's for people who are on the go or have short attention spans. So you decide which it is, but anyway, they're kind of fun. And they're just little snippets of my travels. And yes, I have traveled a lot. What she failed to mention is most of it was for business, so I got paid to do it. So try that out for size. Now, this trip, I had to pay for that myself. So that part was kind of disappointing. But anyway, so today we're going to talk about Pompeii and Herculaneum. And I'm going to ask again, I asked some of you before, who's been to Pompeii? Come on. Yeah, go ahead.
That's next on my list.
You've been to Herculaneum, but not Pompeii?
Correct.
That's just backwards. Nobody's been to Herculaneum and not Pompeii.
That's what they recommended to us.
Yeah, group of 7 of us.
Oh, I've never heard of such a thing. See, normally, this is how I start. Oh, who's been to Pompeii? Who's been to Herculaneum? It's what? Herculaneum is a very well-kept secret, except for you guys. And so I haven't come across very many people who've been to Herculaneum.
I was 10 years old.
You know what, I would say this, you get half credit, but I think you're a little short of half credit. Anyway, so it's very different. That's why I say a tale of two cities. And that's kind of what makes the story even more interesting. I mean, it's fascinating to begin with, but the two cities, very different circumstances, but the same outcome. Okay, so let's get into it. And so I always start with a little geography. And where, no, there's no quiz, but this is audience participation, by the way. So anyway, so I always talk about what am I talking about today? So this is the Naples area. So you see we've got Naples. Herculaneum is literally in the Naples metro area. You can ride the city train, and one of the stops is Herculano, and Herculano is Herculaneum. Now Pompeii is outside the city, and so it's a different train, and it's a little further ride. But you can see their proximity to Vesuvius, right? Now I found this picture, and I think it does kind of a nice job of, it gives you, I like visuals. It gives you a visual of how far is Herculaneum, or excuse me, Vesuvius from Naples. This is the Bay of Naples, all right? So kind of dominates the skyline there. So Naples isn't that far away. Now this is a shot from Pompeii. So this gives you a visual of just how far, and it's 5 miles. So you would think, oh, 5 miles. And 5 miles is definitely in the blast zone. Okay, so, and there used to be more mountain here. Okay, and we learned that from Mount St. Helens. We learned a lot about volcanism from Mount St. Helens, and there's a lot that applies here. So let's talk about the two cities. First, Pompeii. It's a pretty big city. The population was about 20,000. It was a lower to middle class city. Now, we would call it blue collar, but they didn't have collars. Okay. So technically you can't call it blue collar, but you get the message. So there are a lot of merchants. This was a trading route, so it was a very business-oriented city. There's no shortage of brothels. Okay, so that's very important. Some homes had running water, but sewage was a problem. And so I'll show you about that later. The city was covered in 16 feet of ash and rock. And so, yeah, look up. That's pretty close. So think about that. And they died slowly by falling rock and asphyxiation. And that ash is very sharp. And so breathing it is just, it's very difficult. Okay, Herculaneum, population of about 4,000. And it was a resort town, right on the beach, right on the water, mostly residential, high end. The hoi polloi from Rome might have, or Naples might have a villa there. Upscale homes in a seaside resort. They had a more advanced sewage system, right? They had more money, they had a little more upscale, they had the good stuff. Horses and wagons were not allowed on the street. Now, I'll show you something about that. Now, the city was destroyed by pyroclastic flow and buried by 90 feet of mud and rock and ash and lava. Okay. Herculaneum was lost. And it wasn't found until early 1700s. Nobody knew about it. It was just wiped off the map. And for those of you who said, there's kind of two different ways of meeting your maker. You could go the slow way in Pompeii, or you could be vaporized in Herculaneum. So I think one of you two want to go fast. Go to Herculaneum. So what happened on August 24th, 79 AD? Well, okay, so here we're going to have a little geology class. And I found this online, and so again, I'm visual, it helps me understand the story a little bit better. So, all right, here's Herculaneum, and here's Pompeii, all right? Now, so Vesuvius blows, and at first it just billows all this ash. Now, notice the prevailing wind. It's going this way. Well, that's right at Pompeii. So Pompeii is getting the brunt of the ash. Now, on top of that, see where it says bombs? What happens is lava gets blown up into the sky, and it immediately cools, and it becomes rock. And it comes down and lands in all over, but including Pompeii. All right, so they're getting pelted by rocks and ash. And so then, here's pyroclastic flow. Pyroclastic flow is when, okay, you've got this huge ash cloud, and it's been billowing for a day or 2 days, and at some point it becomes so heavy, it just collapses. And as it collapses, it's like an avalanche going down the mountain at 100 miles an hour, and it's 1,000 degrees. Okay, that would be the vaporization part. Okay, so the people in Herculaneum, they were seeing the Pompeii getting pelted. Boy, we dodged a bullet on that one. Yeah, for a day. And then they got the pyroclastic flow. And ultimately, Pompeii got the pyroclastic flow on top of all the ash and rock. So they got double duty, whereas Herculaneum got most of the pyroclastic flow. So it was pretty ugly, all right? So in Pompeii, they were trying to cover their heads, put a pillow on their head to almost like a helmet to avoid getting hit with the rocks. But it was relentless and it was just putting off the inevitable. And this is the pyroclastic flow. Now we saw that at Mount St. Helens. We've all seen the video of this thing just roaring down the mountainside and taking out trees and everything in its path. That's what we were talking about. That's what got Herculaneum. So let's start out in Pompeii. And when you walk in, the first thing we saw was a gladiator school. All right, well, it's kind of cool, gladiators, cool guys. And so this open area was where they trained. And the gladiators would train with wooden swords and spears, and if they gave them real ones, that would be a problem. So, and I have a whole other presentation on the Colosseum and gladiators, all that good stuff. But amongst other things, they learned how to die, and learned to die with honor and not show fear. That was one of the basic precepts of being a gladiator. And this is the arena and it's in pretty good shape, considering. So it's a 20,000 seat arena that the gladiators fought in. Now here's a smaller amphitheater, and I don't know what the seating capacity is, but this is more for speeches and plays. And to take this picture, I had to stick my phone through bars. We couldn't get in because they were getting prepared for Pink Floyd.
Of course.
Yeah.
Can't compete with Pink Floyd.
No, you can't.
Okay, so didn't get in, but anyway, Pink Floyd did. Now, who knows what this is?
Vendors. Food vendors.
Food vendors.
Fast food.
Yeah, fast food. It is. It's fast food. This is called thermopolia. I always have to. Too many syllables there. Thermopolia, and basically there were food vendors all over, and most living quarters did not have any place to prepare food. So it is very typical to buy your meals at the thermopolia. Now, notice that they've got these holes or these warming pots. So it's like a buffet, okay? They keep it warm, and you ladle out what you want. And as you go down the streets, it's almost like strip malls. It's just one little shop after another, and there are a lot of these. And here's another one. Now this was had a bigger selection than but this is more like country buffet. You've got a lot of options here. So, but you also see how small this is, and it's just a small retail space, and there are lots of them. Now, what's this?
Speed bumps.
Actually, it's the opposite of speed bumps.
Keep the carts on the road? Or?
It's a crosswalk,
Oh.
all right? And I say it's the opposite of speed bumps because you have to really put some thought into this because it's got to be high enough. And by the way, this is full of mud and waste. You know what I mean?
Organic matter.
Organic matter. Yeah, I'm not always politically correct, so it's, you know, I'm looking for the words. Okay, you get my drift. But the Romans were incredible engineers. But anyway, they couldn't be too low, they couldn't be too high because wagons had to go over them. So the axle had to clear the stones. And it had to be just wide enough so the wheels of the wagon could get between them. And here you see ruts in the stone from the wagon wheels. I always find that kind of interesting. I mean, it's kind of a proof of, or evidence of how they lived. So he was kind of weird. I like ruts in the stone, but. So then, this was a retail shop, and there is a specific piece of evidence to indicate that. Okay, anybody have an idea?
Is it a bake shop in the way in the back? Is that
Um,
ovens? No?
It's not what I'm going after.
Oh, okay.
You see this groove? You ever go to the West Town Mall and when they close the gate?
Oh.
So that's part of the security is the gate fits right in that slot in the stone. All right, so what's this? Didn't have these in Herculaneum. I'll tell you that. See, this is a little hole that's cored through the stone. That's where you tie up your horse. That's they didn't have hitching posts, but that's the same effect. And you would see them quite often. So you tie up your horse when you went to get a donut. I took a picture of this. It doesn't look like much, but it's kind of a reminder is that these are water pipes and they're made of lead. And so at some point during the course of the Roman Empire, they figured, hey, this lead stuff is pretty easy to work with and we can make pipes and all kinds of stuff. Well, that catches up with you after a while. So they had lead pipes. Anyway, okay, so you mentioned the bakery, all right? And I mentioned donuts. I love donuts. So this is a reenactment, obviously. But the point here is that, kind of like I mentioned, it's kind of like a strip mall where you've got all of these food vendors and thermopolia. And not only, it serves several functions. Obviously, one is providing sustenance, but the other it was a social scene. And kind of like the forum in Rome, it was where you go to meet people and plot an overthrow, whatever. Here you do it when you're at the bakery. So very big part of life in Pompeii. So here's a bakery. And notice it doesn't have the pots, okay? Because you're just slinging bread and pastries. So it's a little bit different. Now, I made the mistake, actually I think it's the first time I gave this presentation. I asked the crowd, well, what do you think these are? And one lady said, oh, those are tip jars. No, they're not tip jars. But these are the jars for wheat and flour, and so they're still intact. you know, what happened at Pompeii and Herculaneum is tragic. But it's such a gift to us to be able to see how they lived. And it's fascinating. So here's their supplies, their contents. All right, so what's this?
Ovens.
No,
No.
these are the millstones. So this, you spin it around, you put it on top, and that's how you grind the wheat. Okay, so you spin it around. So see this hole, you put a piece of wood through there, like this.
Oh, I see, you fill the top.
You fill the top. Yeah, I'm visual too. And you spin it around, and then the flour or the ground wheat comes out the bottom. Right? So very important. Now, as I've studied about this, which doesn't sound like a real exciting thing to do, but I thought it was kind of interesting. They say it can be human or donkey powered. Now, I don't like the idea of a donkey in a bakery. It just doesn't, it doesn't feel right to me. But, so I prefer a picture of a guy spinning the millstone. So there's the oven, all right? So, I mean, look at how intact the ovens are. I mean, that tells you just how sudden this was and thorough and complete the burial of the city was. This is a different bakery. I mean, there's lots of them. And here you see he's got 4 different millstones. So got a lot going on. He's got a bigger oven than the other place. So this bakery was a little bit bigger. Next is Domus Vetiorum, which is the House of Veti. Now, for those of you who went to Pompeii, this is after you.
You know, a lot of this was not uncovered at all.
You know, I don't, and the House of Veti, they spent 20 years restoring this, and it just opened up a year ago.
Yeah. They're
So-
still uncovering a lot of stuff.
Pardon me?
I said, I think they're still uncovering a bunch of
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. Pompeii is about 75% excavated. So, and they continually work on it, right? Not true at Herculaneum. But we'll get to that. So here's Domus Vetiorum. And again, they just finished restoring this thing, 20 years. All right, who knows what this is? There's so many quizzes here.
Really?
No. And this is really hard, so I'll cut you some slack on this one. This is the safe or the strong box. And they like to put it out on display and say, guess what's in there? Now, personally, I put money in my mattress. They like to put it right out front. And I'll show you where, I mean, this was just a display. I'll show you where they had it displayed. But you walk in, and this is how it was. Okay, you can see they've got new wood in here, and okay, it's not exactly how it was, but you see, they all have about the same format or layout. You come into the big atrium, and notice it's at least 20 feet high. Okay, huge atrium, and then you've got this skylight in the roof. And the roof comes down. So a couple of purposes here. First of all, it lights up the inside. Lots of natural lighting, especially when it's that high. I mean, it's really bright in there, as you can see. And the other thing is, when rainwater comes down and it collects in this concrete pool. Thank you. English is my first language. And so here's a a better shot would be pool. But you notice it's just for collection of rainwater. That's all it's for. But if you got natural lighting like that, you know, it's not like they had you know, glass to put on there. So that's how they collect the water that comes in. So, okay, you can still see the corner of the pool. That is where the strong box was. And this is the anchor. So it was anchored. So you walk into the atrium and say, and here's my money, in case you're wondering. But it's anchored to the floor. And then this gives you a sense of how this is built with the stone and the plaster and the painting. Now, this is a close-up of the plaster is about 3 or 4 inches thick. So there's a lot of plaster, and then brilliant colors painted on top of the plaster. Now, these days, when you say, okay, we're gonna paint the living room. Okay, you slap on a couple of coats and you're done, right? No. This is painting the living room right here, all hand painted. And that it's kind of like a chair rail that goes all the way around.
Is
And,
that the original?
yeah.
It wasn't recreated or anything? Wow.
I wonder what kind of paint they used to last as long as it has.
Yeah,
I don't know what all the components were. I know that they had little cups of each color powder, and they would, as they were painting, they mixed the powders together to get the right color, and then they mix it with a lime that kind of makes it not an acid but a base so that it etches in, and that's why it holds its color so well.
it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
How vivid some of these colors are. And these cherubs are all doing tasks. Now, the Betties were slaves. And ultimately they earned their freedom, which is you could buy your freedom or earn it. And they became vintners where they made wine and then sold it. And they made a lot of money. This place is 12,000 square feet. Okay. This is not your basic bungalow. And these are 2 former slaves. So it's pretty impressive. Now, also take a look at the amphora here. And I'm gonna come back and talk about that a little bit. So this is the triclinium. And triclinium is basically the dining room. Now, you know, sometimes you'll see in movies or whatever, sitting around a table. No, that's not how it works. They lay it on couches. Yeah, just someone dropping grapes in my mouth. That'd be great, but yeah, they laid on couches and then had these small tables that they would have food on. So let me go back. This long, narrow room had several couches in it, and it's called the triclinium. And look at the detail of the painting. Now, these are mythological events that are painted, and mythological people and creatures. So, so much detail goes into this. Now, here's a close-up, and again, you can see the detail and the vivid colors that has survived a couple thousand years. It's absolutely amazing. All right, so then you go into the garden. The garden is in the center. And it's open air, and it's big. And this is pretty typical, to have the garden in the center of the building. Now, there's a walkway that goes all the way around, all right? Now, You see these dots that are in regular formation? You know what those are? They're called cat's eyes. And they would put these small white stones between the corners, and it would reflect the moon, or if you had a lamp, and so you could see where you're going because it would reflect off the floor.
Oh, that's cool.
Brilliant. Romans were not stupid. Their construction and ability to design their architecture was incredible. So, fate of the fallen. We've all seen National Geographic talk about the dead from Pompeii. And I was disappointed on this tour because we only saw a couple of these. I want to see a lot of them. No, it's kind of macabre. Okay, I admit it. But this process was figured out in the 1800s. And they figured out that the bodies were, it kind of turned to stone around them, the ash and the pyroclastic flow. And all the soft tissue deteriorated, and all was left was bones and the cavity. So they figured out if we just pour plaster in there and harden it, we can get an outline of these people and how they died. What this doesn't have is that there's a vent hole that they have to have, but that's a detail. So they pour it in and let it dry and then dig it out. Now, there are about 100 of these. Now, they don't know how many people died. They figure, who knows? You throw out 2,000. Okay, that's a nice number. But 100 of these have been found. And in all these different positions, we've read the stories, and it's pretty sad. They even found horses in stables and created these plaster casts. So it was pretty rough. And this guy really had a bad day. Yeah, so there's a little earthquake going on, and he got the wrong end of that stick. So we laugh about the movie A Million Ways to Die in the West. Well, there's a million ways to die in Pompeii. All right, so let's talk about Herculaneum, the other place. Now, so in this picture, it represents Pliny the Elder. And Pliny the Elder was in Naples. He lived in Naples. And he observed what was going on. And Pliny the Elder was a famous historian. And he decided he was going to try to rescue these people. And so he arranged a couple of naval ships to go to Herculaneum because they were right on the beach. And he made a couple of attempts to save the people of Herculaneum, and they all died. I mean, Pliny the Elder and the people who were trying to save them died. So this was recorded by Pliny the Younger. He and his mother were visiting Pliny the Elder. That was his uncle. And so he recorded all what happened during the course of this disaster. And so again, the others were buried under all the ash. This was just the violent pyroclastic flow. They didn't know what hit them. And so they died very quickly, not pleasantly, but quickly. So, all right, so you get off the train at Herculano, And it's it's a short walk to the ruins at Herculaneum. And this is it, okay? So I'm standing on one corner, and this is pretty much it. Now, talked about being buried under 90 feet of ash and mud. Okay, this right here, this was the beach. All right? This is all from the volcano, all this land. So this is, if you had beachfront property then, you don't anymore. So, okay, I'm standing on one corner, and the next picture I'm gonna show is I'm standing up here at the boathouse. So now I'm standing where what used to be beach, and I'm looking down on Herculaneum. And so one thing to note, there's a couple things to notice here. First of all, you notice how the city comes right up to the edge of the excavation? They built the city over it. They didn't know it was there. There will be no more excavation at Herculaneum. That's it. That's all you're gonna see, because there are people living above it. So, and I don't think they're gonna get enough volunteers to give up their homes. So this is it. And I mentioned earlier that Herculaneum was forgotten. It was lost. And it was discovered in 1709 by a guy who was digging a well for the monastery. And he was digging his well, and he goes down at about 90 feet, and he starts pulling up granite and statues and all kinds of stuff. Okay, there's something down there. So that's how they found Herculaneum. Now, so this is the boathouse. Okay, so this would have been right on the shore. And here's an artist rendering. Okay, so here's the boathouse, and this is an idea of what Herculaneum looked like. But the boathouse was really important because it wasn't discovered until 1980. Yeah, they're still finding this stuff. So again, I'm looking down onto the boathouse, and this is what they found. When they discovered in 1980, they thought everybody was gone. I mean, they thought Herculaneum had been evacuated. These are the people who were waiting for Pliny the Elder. They were in the boathouse, and finally the pyroclastic flow evaporated them, so what's left is skeletons. Now, these are not real skeletons. They're representation of what was there, but it's pretty effective. So they discovered 300 skeletons and you can just imagine running down to the shore and taking shelter in the boathouse. And the rumor is that Pliny is coming. So that's a real visual that's easy to believe and easy to understand. So here's another angle. This shows you how high this is. And again, this is all ash and rock. This all came from the volcano. So I took a closer, so it was like a mud river. We saw that at Mount St. Helens. So all the rock and mud, and then here's the ash, and it's all solid. And you see it's wrapped around buildings down here. So it just gives you a visual sense of what happened. Now this is just a kind of an aside. This is our tour guide. And we saw this a lot. In this area, they use this honeycomb construction method. and I can't explain it to you, but it handled earthquakes better.
Stuff can shift around and doesn't move.
So you see it a lot when you look at the walls. So again, the Romans were really great architects. So here is a home in Herculaneum. So similar concept. You've got the opening in the top and coming down so the rainwater collects, but very high ceiling in the atrium, lots of light. Okay, they had that figured out. Now, so here's the pool. We decided it's pool, but they had a fountain. And they had a drain for when it overflowed. So again, Herculaneum was a little higher class. They had running water. They had more things than they had in Pompeii. So pretty classy. Walk in, jeez, you got a fountain going. Out on the street, occasionally there'd be these water troughs, and this was Hercules, the namesake for Herculaneum, and water would flow out of his mouth into that trough. And you would see that pretty often in the streets. But also notice how narrow the streets are. No horses, no wagons in Herculaneum.
You said that before, but we saw in Herculaneum, we saw wagon ruts down some of the roads.
Okay, I don't doubt that.
Yeah, but nobody said that.
I've just read that, and the streets were different.
They're narrow.
They're
I'll
narrow.
give you that.
Yeah. And if you think about it, how could they not?
Yeah.
You know, you gotta get deliveries, you gotta have supply chain. So, I'm sure you're right. But it was not to the degree
Yeah,
that it was in Pompeii. Okay?
that fountains, those are actually kind of cool. I mean, they're watertight. It's 4 slabs of stone, but they're tied together with
Iron straps
Yeah.
to hold them tight. And that's the same construction that you have in the Colosseum. They had iron straps between all the building blocks. So, of course, they were all stolen in the Dark Ages, but they left their mark. So, again, they had the street vendors. Now, to go to the spa and pool. All right. I suspect that Pompeii didn't have a spa and a pool, but I don't know that for sure. But, so they say, we're going to the spa and pool, and this is the gymnasium where, an open air exercise, kind of like the gladiator school. And you kind of have to adjust your mind because you say, okay, there's just this wall here. Well, that wall wasn't there. So it was an open area. Now, I thought I was kind of curious. I looked at this column, and the Romans were famous for their granite or marble columns. What's this? There's brick. They cheated. And so I asked about it. I said, no, what's with the brick inside the column? And he said, well, Rome could do it because they were close to the quarry. But Naples, not so close. So it just made a lot more economic sense to make them with brick and then put plaster on and make it look like it's granite or marble. So, okay, that was kind of an eye-opener for me. So now the pool is inside that hill, all right, which wasn't a hill before. And so they had to burrow in, dig a tunnel to get to the pool and the spa. So this is like the locker room, right? The mosaic on the floor is spectacular.
You actually have to walk on that to get through it's like you're gonna let us walk on part of that? It was mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's a little unusual. You don't expect that.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's lasted this long.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we have another quiz. Notice the ceiling. And it's rounded with ribs. What is the purpose of that design?
Strength.
No.
Acoustics.
Okay, so you've been in a hot, steamy room. What happens? You get condensation on the ceiling. Where does it go? On your head. This way, it just comes down along the sides. And then when you put your clothes and your towel up here, it gets all wet. But at least your head stays dry. But that's why I do it, to channel the condensation off the ceiling. And then this is the sauna. They were really good at that. And they love their saunas. And the ceiling is the same again. Now, this looks a little weird, but this is the center of the pool. All right. Again, they had to tunnel in, and this is all the ash that's turned to stone. And this was the center of the pool, and this is a fountain that was in the center of the pool. Now, the pool was in shape of a cross, all right? And so they tunneled in one direction. That's how far it is. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. That's just one direction of the cross of the pool. So it was gigantic. Now, there's a footnote about the Romans love going to the spa and the bath, the public bath. Well, that was before chlorine. So they went there when they were sick to get healthy. I think other people got sick by going. Anyway, it was not up to today's standards. So next is House of Neptune and Amphitrite. Now, so this is another restored home, and it had a retail shop in the front, and the owners lived in the back. So this is a very well-preserved retail shop. Now, there's one thing which I've never quite figured out. And these amphorae, why are they shaped like this? You can't just, what's the point? Because they often have oils, liquids, solids. So, all right, when in doubt, ask Google. So I Googled it. I said, what's with the shape of the amphora? And they were shaped like that for transportation in ships. So you could kind of lock them in, and also you could stick them into sand or soft ground. Now, I still think it's kind of a lousy design, but hey, that's just me. But they did it for 1,000 years or so it couldn't be all that bad. So this place, the retail shop is in front, and this is evidence of what happened at Herculaneum. Now, when you get a pyroclastic flow, it's going 100 miles an hour, it's 1,000 degrees. In Pompeii, no wood survived. It all burned. Here, the wood survived because it sucked all the oxygen out. It was hot, but it didn't burn. So this is a wooden railing that's on this mezzanine right above the retail shop. The wood survived, more or less. A little more like charcoal, but that's kind of how you make charcoal. And the other thing is that in Herculaneum, you've got second floor. and furniture in the second floor. It was much better preserved than Pompeii. And I took this picture because this really shows you what happened. I mean, it's turned to charcoal, but it's still there, which is really the impressive part. So here's so we're back in the living quarters, and this is the triclinium, the dining room. And the shopkeeper is very prosperous. And so he's got a fountain, and this is a little bit of a weird design, but I want you to step back a second. This is for a statue, and then these inlets for candles for lighting. But so I just want to focus on this part. The artwork of the mosaic is beautiful. You know, these small tile pieces and the feathers on the peacock are, I think it's a peacock, I'm not sure. But pretty darn impressive. You know, and again, that's a couple thousand years ago, and it went through the pyroclastic blast. Now, I showed you this section, and I mentioned this is the triclinium, or the dining room. Well, sometimes they would put their couches around the water, and they put the food on little boats. You know, not quite. That's my mother would call that playing with your food. But hey, that's this is upper class. They could afford to do stuff like this. And this is a cubiculum, which whenever I say that, I think about the cube I used to work in. And it's a lot like an office cube, but it's called a cubiculum, which is kind of a small bedroom. But here's the wood frame of a bed. It more or less survived. So, I mean, I'm pretty much in awe of that. I don't know if everyone else is, but you know, once again, the colors on the walls, you know, there's certainly some disintegration, but overall not bad. Now, okay, who remembers Johnny Carson? So what does Johnny Carson have to do with Herculaneum? So whenever Ed McMahon would say, "Man, was it hot?" What would the crowd say? How hot was it? Okay, so it was hot.
How hot was it?
It was so hot. Notice what's missing here? The brain would boil and blow out the top.
Oh my gosh.
And this is brain glass. So it was hot. Sorry, I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, it's a nasty way to go. So yeah, it was hot. So last question. Where do sailors go on shore leave?
Sounds like a joke.
Oh, what are you thinking about? This is rated PG until this one. So in the back of this really nice house was a room that was rented to a prostitute. And I mentioned that, and this is in Pompeii, where there were lots of trading, people coming from all over the Mediterranean. But and in Pompeii, they spoke generally Greek and Latin. But there are other languages, and sometimes the language of love just isn't enough to communicate, you know? So the menu items are on the wall. So you could point point. Anyway, so it was a communication aid, let's put it that way, which I thought was kind of fascinating, don't you know? So that's the tale of two cities. Any other questions? Most of it was true. Well, thanks for spending an hour with me. Much appreciated.
How long since you've been there?
Last year? It was,
2 years.
no, it was last year. It's my wife, she was with me. I thought you were with me.
So Pliny the Elder wrote about Herculaneum, or his nephew.
Plenty of the younger.
Pliny of the Younger. How did they lose track of the fact that it was there? They just couldn't get at, because you said it wasn't discovered until the 1700s. Would they have always known, based on the historical records, that it was?
You know, I can only speculate.
Okay.
You know, Pliny the Younger, both Plinies were historians,
Mhm.
and you got to keep in mind that there was a lot of dark ages.
Yeah.
After the fall of Rome, you get up into the 15th, 16th, 17th century before there's enlightenment. And so my guess is that a lot of this stuff is just, I mean, in the dark ages, who's reading this stuff?
Mhm.
I'm just speculating.
Yeah,
That's
that makes sense. Definitely.
The paintings that you showed in Pompeii were more spectacular than the paintings we saw in Herculaneum. I mean, they were very interesting and the colors were good, but they weren't nearly as intricate as the ones that you showed in Pompeii.
Yeah, I think, I would guess that's why they wanted to restore the House of Vedi, because it was so spectacular. It was, I mean, they spent 20 years on darn thing.
Yeah. So we only had one optional travel day as we were going from Sorrento to Florence. And so we had the choice of either going to Pompeii or Herculaneum. And we were told to do Herculaneum because it's more intact. Pompeii, you know, most of the stuff is in museums. It's not in Pompeii anymore. So that's why we chose Herculaneum.
And that's very true. If you really want to do this right, which we did, you have to go to the Man Museum, M-A-N-N. Museum, it's an acronym, in Naples. And it is unbelievable, all this stuff. It's got all the gladiator stuff. It's that basically at some point, whoever the king was said, okay, just take everything and put it in that museum. So you're not going to find many antiquities when you go to Pompeii. You have to go to the museum in Naples, and it is well worth it. Yeah, you're right.
We only gave ourselves half a day, which wasn't nearly
So we
enough.
did like 1/3 of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you go, plan on spending a couple of days.
Yeah, it's spectacular.
Something I always wondered about all these years is that if they had any warning about it happening, what kind of warning they might.
Well, there's tremors,
Right,
but you know, there's been so many threats.
right,
You know, we had the same thing. Oh yeah, it's like crying wolf. Yeah. You know, sure. And then it blows.
and it was too late.
Yep.
It had been a couple thousand years since the last eruption, I guess. So that Romans didn't, as smart as they were, they didn't know much about volcanism. So they were always getting earthquakes. They didn't have any idea that the top was going to blow off the mountain. That was, you know, they don't have any past history of it. They were totally shocked, even though they had earthquakes beforehand, kind of warning them, they didn't know what was
They
coming.
didn't know what they were.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly an age of enlightenment.
Right.
I find this so fascinating.
I do too.
So,
Well, thank you very much, Joe. And hopefully we'll have you back.
well, be nice to me.
No, I was gonna ask you, tell us about yourself and how you got into all the travel.
Okay, it's a fascinating story.
Oh. Making sure.
So, I'm from Belleville. So that's amazing right
Where are
there.
you from?
Belleville. Where's that?
Next to Glarus,
No.
Company.
South of
That's what I
Verona.
always tell people.
Anyway, so, went to school in Madison and afterwards started my 45-year journey in the corporate world. And I lived all over the country, worked for international companies, worked for Honda and Steel, and finally a Japanese company. And so in the book, okay, I write a book about basically 50 years of international travel. I went to Europe, I did the backpacking thing when I was a student.
Nice.
Boy, those are some interesting stories.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't tell them, but I did. Anyway, so then I worked for these international companies, and for the last 20 years, I was responsible for international marketing for a Japanese company. And so I was responsible for marketing in Russia and not so much China, but Australia and Latin America, and North America, and Europe. And so I traveled a lot. And I had for several years, I had a desk in Chicago and one in Tokyo. And I flew to Tokyo 53 times.
Wow. Beats mine.
Yeah, 13 hours, but who's counting? And so I worked for equipment companies. And as a result, this was not a case of, okay, you fly into London and you go to a 5-star hotel and then go back to the airport. No. I went out into the coffee plantations in Brazil and the wheat fields in Argentina. I was out amongst them.
Nice.
And so, yeah, that's where you really learn about cultures and it creates some adventures, which I tell in the book. But anyway, it was an incredible opportunity. And that's how I viewed it. Now, living in hotels at airports, that's not. But just the opportunities that I had. And then when I retired, first summer I cut grass for the university. Well, that's fun, but it's not particularly mentally stimulating. But those lines were straight. And so I took some classes at the university, which is good. But then I realized I've got thousands of pictures. And this is because of the advent of the smartphone, of the iPhone. You know, I've got all these pictures. What am I going to do with them? And so I know my kids didn't want them. And throughout the course of my career, I gave a lot of PowerPoint presentations, and I thought, you know what? I can put these in PowerPoint, and I bet I can get people to sit there and be bored to tears. I was right. So that's kind of the genesis of, and so I've been doing this for 3 years. This is, I told Sarah, I've done about 200 of these, just in the radius around Madison. And it's fun for me to meet people like yourselves and to share stories and get corrected from time to time. Hey, I forgot to tell you, no fact checking. So this is what I do now. and it's fun.
That's wonderful. Well, you know, we often talk about that too, because I didn't travel as much as you did, but my company, I started traveling internationally as well. And they are spectacular opportunities. I was able to take time off, you know, I'm gonna take another week, I'm gonna go here or there. And then you come home, and it's just like, who do you share this with? Nobody wants to look at your pictures.
That's
you
exactly
know?
right.
Yeah.
And so Sarah said, so you have family members? Oh, hell no.
You know, and if you
I mean,
mention
they all-
pictures, people are
I'm
like,
too stupid
oh, yeah, well,
to
that's
do,
cool. I'll
say anything
never-
interesting.
And so, yeah, it's just like, it's so sad. You have them all locked up in your head and it's exciting.
And you know what, and Mary Kay, I give her a lot of credit. She's the one, she's hiding in the bed. She said, why don't you write a book?
That's good.
You know, why don't you write it down? And so I did. It's 70 short stories.
Did you find it really difficult to put them in order? Because that's what I'm trying to figure out on mine. It's like, well, wait a minute, did I go here, you know?
Well,
what year was
you know,
that?
you need prompts. And especially on
I saved a
the
lot
trip
of my
50 years
tickets.
ago?
Yeah.
So a friend and I went, we're still friends, and I contacted him and I said, did you keep your diary? He said, I did.
Nice.
And he writes very legibly. And so I had his diary, and when we went, he took the camera, we had a Brownie camera,
Wow.
okay? Remember the Brownie?
Yeah.
And he used slide film,
Wow.
not pictures, slides. And so he digitized them for me. And so
Nice.
looking at the pictures helped me.
Yeah.
And I had trip reports that I look at, you know, I look for prompts. And I tell you, at 3 a.m, I wake up and go, oh yeah, you know, and
Yeah.
you think about
Yeah.
something, and I started with like 30 stories, and I ended up with 70,
Wow.
because you just come to mind. I mean,
Yeah, it's
they're
amazing.
in there somewhere.
Well,
It's
I
just-
had the luxury too, because like you had experiences and so did I, because I mean, I was working when I was there, but like I said, I took longer weekends or I took extra time. But the company I worked for, we had, you know, you probably, I don't know, you might have seen customer ads, but, you know, we had offices all over the place and I mean, it was just like, okay, well, I was in China several times and, well, this weekend we're going to go up to the T. We're going to, you know, climb the Great Wall. We're going to take you here. We're going to take you there. And, you know, my experiences in Italy too, you know, one of my coworkers, I can't even tell you how many places they took me. And then they had me at their house and they make their own liqueurs.
Yes, the hospitality,
Yeah.
which you don't find here all that much.
No.
And there are a lot of cultural, this is kind of like the author's thing already.
It's a warm up for the one to come.
It makes you realize how kind of cold we are
I know.
versus, and in my acknowledgements, I acknowledge the distributors whom I visited because they shared so much, their time, and I mean, I went to Israel for a week. He took me everywhere,
Yeah, they do.
and it's just,
Yeah, they're experiences I never would have even thought to have.
And I saw all the pictures.
well, that's the problem being a spouse.
I had a chance to go a few times, but I didn't go.
You have to endure.
Yeah. I had to take care of things.
Yes, and you know, and it's nice to hear somebody, I mean, I'm glad you're doing this because even for me, I haven't been to Pompeii, I've been to a lot of places, but I want to go. But it's just so nice to hear somebody